Hello, everyone. You're listening to the Small Business Show. My name is Swire Ho. You can also call me the promo guy. My guest today is Jon Morris, founder and CEO of Fiscal Advocate, Inc. At 30, Jon started a digital marketing agency called Rise Interactive. When Jon sold Rise 16 years later, it was one of the largest independent digital agency in the world. Jon's framework of growth is the foundation of this episode and is applicable across various verticals to help business owners scale their companies. Welcome to the show, Jon.
Thank you so much for having me, Swire. Really excited to be here.
I know this is an interesting story, and we could probably spend the entire episode on that. But to keep it short and for the listener, how did you bring the agency from 12K, I guess it's revenue, all the way up to 35 million plus?
So the first big thing that I would think is, I went to University of Chicago for business school. I entered an annual business plan competition. I won $10,000, and that was the seed money to start my money. Now, I took second place in that competition. I can tell you 20 years later, I'm still very, very bitter. It should have been first. But that being said, when you go to business school, a lot of what you're taught is this concept of you raise money from VCs or private equity, and then, in 5 to 7 years, you have this big exit. And I have a different approach. I'm an incrementalist, and I believe in just building a great business. And I had a 20-year time horizon when I built Rise. I actually exited after 16 years. And with Fiscal Advocate, I have a 20-year time horizon. Now, I'll be 70 when that happens, so I'll probably not have a 20-year time horizon for my next venture. But the idea is I used to do a lot of marathons. And when you do marathon training, it's 18 weeks long. And every week you do a long run. Your first long run is 6 miles. The next week is 7 miles. You then go down to 5. You then go up to 9. You then go up to 10, then down to 7. And I took that approach to running my business. And the idea was, rather than weeks and miles, it was going to be years and dollars. And so I wanted every year to invest more and more into the business. And what I found is I happen to be a data guy, and I love numbers, and I love coming up with insights based on what the numbers tell me, is I wanted to make sure that I was making the right investments, and I really built a strong financial infrastructure that would help me understand, what should my margin be? How much should I spend in sales and marketing? Should I invest in R&D? What makes us unique? And so I would say taking a long-term approach, having a really solid data-driven decision-making process. And then I would say the third one would be really focusing on building a world-class product. And the idea is that every year, your product should be better than the year it was before. Now, that could be the people that you hire, the processes, the technology. But if you think about a salesperson that goes out and convinces somebody to give you money, how do you make sure that the experience is actually better than what they sold you? And if you can do that, and you can be good at sales, in the long run, you should make a good amount of money, and also, more importantly, add value to your customers.
Yeah, I really love that. I want to ask you so many follow-up questions. I love the progressive overload analogy from running, right? So did you have all the 20 years mapped out already, like you do your training runs?
No, I wish I did, but my ultimate goal was to be the largest independent digital agency in the world. That was my goal. I had employee number one. They met with me in my 1,300 square foot condo in a tiny little office, and I told him that this was my goal of what I wanted to do. And he joined me, and he was on the ride for the vast majority of that time period. And so I knew where I wanted to go. I just didn't care how long it took me to get there. And, with Fiscal Advocate, we right now provide financial management services for professional service companies. I know that I want to be the best at this particular niche that we are focused on. And I want to make sure every year it gets better. I have no timeline to when this ends. I just want to make sure that the product is getting better, the company is getting bigger, the resources are getting better, so that all my employees, my investors, my clients all win in the process.
Yeah. What makes you decided, obviously you started digital marketing agency, you love marketing part, right? You love the,
Yeah.
engagement part. So what makes you decided to becomes like, if I could say it, becomes a numbers guy.
Yeah. Well, a couple things. One, professional service people are my people. I love the challenge of dealing with how do you staff accounts and resource planning and all those things that come along with it. So one, I really like the customer that I'm servicing. I understand their pain and I like being involved in that process. The second thing is I really believe that the finances are the foundation towards what helps businesses tick. It is the boring infrastructure that people generally don't think about. They don't want to think about. They just want to know that it's, in the right hands for someone to take care of them. And look, I got a master's in finance, an MBA with a specialization in finance.
Hmm.
I happen to be good at this. I happen to like the numbers. And I also, feel like I'm adding more value here than I did at Rise. And I'm just going to give you a story at Rise, and I'm going to compare that to a story here.
Okay.
Uh, I had a client that was Fortune 15 at Rise.
Hmm.
The retainer was great. The people were great. The quality of work was great. Like every single thing you could want in a client, they provided. However, if a new CEO came in and fired us, and not only fired us, but decided, you know what, we're going to stop doing this work altogether, I think that they would go from a top Fortune 15 company to a top Fortune 15 company. I think the impact would have been very negligible on the overall business. And, at Rise, we dealt with, some of the largest companies in the world. And when you're dealing with large companies in the world, you're a piece of a big, big puzzle, but the impact is generally much smaller.
Hmm.
Here, I'm helping, $5 million to $30 million companies where I'm working with the owners and I can feel and see the impact, greatly. I've helped companies that were literally on the verge of going bankrupt. All of a sudden they have incredible financial success. I've helped companies sell and received, emails about how they could never have done it without us. And so I feel that the impact that I'm having is just a lot more substantial.
Hmm. Thanks for sharing that. I think it kind of lead me to these questions, and especially with service provider nowadays, it's really low cost to entry. You could be one person, or you could be working with a team of 10, 50, or a larger service provider. What do you think from seeing the number are the most common mistakes that make a good company and a not so good company?
So a couple of things. The first thing is, and I know you're going to want to talk later about this whole concept of my CPR score, but I'll
Hmm.
start talking about uh, the gross margin. Most professional service companies that I've spoken with do not know what their gross margin is, what gross margin is, how to calculate it, and why it's important. And it honestly is the most important number that you need to know. So could you explain real quickly, when you take your revenue, and when I say revenue, it's your real revenue. If you have any pass-through revenue, it doesn't count. Minus all of your labor costs. So costs of your employees, your freelancers, travel and entertainment for clients, client gifts, technology, whatever is left over is your gross profit. And if you take your gross profit minus your or divided by your revenue, you're going to get your gross margin. And so this is basically determining how profitably you service your customers. And if you don't have a gross margin above 40%, you will most likely lose money. If your gross margin is between 40 and 50%, you're going to have to choose between investing in the business or losing money. Investing in the business or making a profit. You won't have enough money to do both. And if your gross margin is above 50%, you generally could be very profitable and invest in your business. And so,
What's the norm in service-based industry? Is it
50,
around?
50 to 60% is where you're supposed to be. Most companies, when they come to me, are in their low 40s. I've had companies in their 20s. I've had a client in negative gross margin where they were actually spending more in their payroll than they were in revenue. And so, the reason why this is such an important number is, generally speaking, the non-client related expenses are about 30% of your revenue. And if you're smaller, they're generally a higher percentage. And so because of that, you need to make sure that you have enough gross margin to cover the cost and still make a profit. So that's typically where I start with people. But there's also really three major KPIs that we want you to focus on, and it has to do with cash, profit margin, and year-over-year revenue growth. And if you understand those numbers, everything else should fall into place.
I think a lot of time, and obviously, I'm in the product based business, right? We buy product, customer buy from us, we buy from suppliers, and then make profit from that. But for service provider, if I am correct to make the question where people will go to negative, is sometimes they have landed a whale. For example, like in your case, at Fortune 15 company, obviously they will have in favor all the payment terms, all the terms and conditions is in their favor. They have more lawyers than you do, right? So you actually have to bend over and sometimes hire maybe 2, 3, or 5 representatives just to service them, but you don't get the money up front. So going back to your gross profit, you might potentially be making money, but then it's kind of killing you in the short run on the cash flow. Is it sometimes where people run into in the service industries?
So as you get into larger and larger corporations, you absolutely are right. They have a lot of negotiating power. One of the things that I recommend is that you invest very heavily in sales and marketing, and that you develop a lead gen machine, because that lead gen machine becomes your negotiating power with those large companies. So let's just say they're like, well, we're going to pay you in 120-day payment term, which, by the way, there are some, very large organizations that's their starting point. If you have enough leads and enough business coming in, you can say, look, the one thing I don't negotiate on is my hourly rate and when I get paid. And I am more than happy to work with you. And I totally understand if you want to go work with someone else, but I have 10 other companies willing to buy my time right now at these terms. And so it gives you negotiating power when you have high lead flow. When you have low lead flow, then it's really hard because you're desperate for that revenue. And so, building a sales machine helps you in your negotiations with those larger companies.
Yeah, I think that's a really good concept, but it would take a lot of confidence and believing in your own ability to do that, right? Because if a big name client, I don't know what, I don't really care what industry you're in, like you will be motivated, right? If product basis is I'm selling to Walmart or Target, or, in your case, a big provider that runs a lot of digital marketing come in, then you'll be moved, but you're kind of stepping away from your principle a lot of time, right? So if you do negotiate in their terms, a lot of times actually, people lose money on a big name client. I noticed that.
So without a doubt, and also a lot of times they'll also do a cost plus negotiation. So as you're dealing with these huge mega clients, they'll be like, we're going to take your payroll and add 30% to it. You know what I'm saying? And so it's one of the things that I always talk to people about is when you think about who you want to go after as a client, and I have the range go from mice, which might be like $50 a month, to elephants, which might be, several $1 million a year, is there is good and bad in both. Okay. The mice one, really hard to build a sales force to acquire them. It's generally got to be marketing led. You have to have a very low touch sales cycle where, the larger clients, they have more negotiating power. If you lose a client, it's really painful. I was at a friend of mine's office that was officing out of a major holding company's office space in New York. And there was this one corner that was completely dark. And my friend turned to me and goes, yesterday, there were 100 people sitting in that office and they lost XYZ client and they let go of 100 people.
Wow.
And so, the impact and I can tell you that, when owners have to do those types of things, it's hard and it's emotional. And, it's like the hardest part of our business, of the professional service business, is that our inventory are people, and they're not only just people, they're people we love and really care about. But if your revenue adjusts in the negative, you have to make tough decisions. That's just a good example of it. So that's one of the downsides of winning these large clients, is the impact can be really big if you lose one.
Yeah, it's like a fine line. Like you do want the big name, and then they will probably help you down the line, right? I work with XYZ, it's a big major company.
Yeah.
Then everyone knows. Versus, I work with Joe Smith Plumbing, right?
Yeah.
And nobody knows, but it's good and bad. And I think it's the key is balance, right? You can't have just one well and nothing else, right?
Yeah.
You should have, all the mice that you talk about. So when it really takes a hit, maybe it downs for a little bit, but you don't have to fire 100 people.
Yeah, it all depends on your business model. Like at Rise, my business model was to have 50 great clients. And when I won a client, I would generally sunset a client. And I wanted 50 clients. I had, between my leadership team, we were able to manage the relationships with those clients really well. And we wanted bigger clients, like we were on that journey, but we also had an amazing sales and marketing machine. We invested very heavily in our technology, and we invested very heavily in our sales and marketing. So leads were coming in regularly.
Yeah, I think, you as a business owner, and for the listener too, there are always going to be a fit, and there's sometimes got to not be a good fit. Like if you try to go for the not a good fit and you go off your principle, that's when things happen.
Exactly.
Let's talk about, the cash profit revenue, CPR. What is it? And can you let us know more about the concept?
Absolutely. So I was in a pitch about 9 months ago, and the person was telling me how they track a few hundred KPIs every day. And my instinct is that if you're tracking a few hundred KPIs every day, you're really tracking nothing. And so what I want to do is I want to help professional service companies think about the least amount of information they need to look at to make decisions. And when I think about what is most important, there are only 3 KPIs that matter. How much cash you have relative to your monthly overhead. One of my favorite examples is Microsoft bought LinkedIn for $26.2 billion in an all cash deal. Okay, so if you have lots of cash, you get to do really cool things. And so I want people to think about how much their monthly overhead is, and I want them to have at least 2 times their monthly overhead in a savings account, if not more. The second one is your profit margin. I want you to have a 20% profit margin. That's kind of the gold standard in the professional service industry. It also gives you money to invest back in the business and also have a profit, provided you can have that 50% gross margin. And so that's the second big one. And then the third one is your year-over-year revenue growth. Going back to my 20-year time horizon, I happen to go on a tear. I went from 1 million to 2 million to 4 million to 8 to 12 to 13 to 19. I had these major clips. I generally am not recommending that for everybody. I believe that if you can have consistent 20% growth on a year-over-year basis, that gives you enough money to, that builds a great business over time, but it's not a large enough growth rate that it's easy to plan for the infrastructure. It's easy to plan for the investments. But if you can consistently do 20% top line growth and 20% profit, bottom line growth, and build your cash, you're going to have a great business. Now, in terms of CPR score, it is a proprietary scoring system that we use that takes those 3 components, cash, profit, and revenue, and gives you, a professional service company, a credit score, so to speak, just like an individual credit score, where they know exactly how they're doing. So a 60 is basically, or above, you're doing great. 0, you're basically out of business. And so you want to look at the 3 numbers, and it, is the proprietary scoring system through our technology that gives you there is a play on health. So CPR is health, and an acronym for cash, profit, and revenue.
Yeah, you open up a lot of follow-up conversation. I don't know where to start.
Yeah.
I think for the cash flow, I do want it to stay in there a little bit longer, because I know for service and product-based company, it's the same thing, right? So if you have a big order, if service-based professional, you have to hire more people. You might need to get a bigger office or different CRM system, right? Like you said, if you double your business every single year, it's good, but then your infrastructure, like maybe your access to capital, you have to talk to a banker now, right? You can't do it on your own cash. And then you have to get a bigger space or office, or maybe you can't use a certain software anymore because you've outgrown it. So with, every changes, there are headaches. It can't just go smooth. Like, you make it sound easy, John. Right.
It's not easy. And a lot of the decisions are emotional decisions. Like, I'll tell you the number one reason I see in terms of companies that have low amounts of cash that are profitable is owner's distribution. And oftentimes the lifestyle of the owner is greater than the amount of cash that the business is producing. And so, that's a tough conversation to have with your client, that we got to really think about how we rein in your personal expenses, because I know you want to spend $500,000 a year, but you're only making $250,000 a year in profit. And so, those are the things that I've seen as probably the number one cause for profitable companies for not making, not growing their cash. But then there are ones that, they keep on envisioning that they're going to win that next big client, and they start getting building up debt. And then we have to talk about how we restructure that debt and develop a debt payment plan and turn them to profitability. So it's far from easy. What's easy is knowing what to look at. What is not easy is a couple things. Sometimes the decision making is just hard. Like, you have to let go of people you care about, or you have to make adjustments to your personal lifestyle. So sometimes those are hard. And sometimes the answers are unclear. Like, we're not winning enough new business, and our sales and marketing strategy is not working. Well, it's not like everyone has a light switch of like, oh, let me just turn this switch on and all of a sudden I'll get new business. You have to go spend money. You have to test. You have to go see if it works. And so, there's a lot of challenges that, you have to think about as well.
Yeah. So if they using the CPR score, that you provide, so they could probably tell a better story. So if I'm, way in the 80s, right? So if I taking on new challenges, I could probably can look into it more, versus if I'm 40, right? So I'm below the average. So I probably shouldn't do anything major until I get my score up to a certain point. Is that correct?
Well, no. So I would say if you're in your 40s, you might need to do something major. So it all depends. Like, let's just say you're in your 40s. The main question is why. You're not at 60. Is it because you're not growing fast enough? Is it because you're not profitable enough? Or is it because you don't have enough cash? And so let's just say you have a profitability problem. Well, then we want to look at, there's really 2 major numbers there. There's the gross margin, which we've talked a lot about today. And then there's all of your non-client related expenses, which is grouped into 3 areas: sales and marketing, operations and finance, and your executive team. And so you're going to want to look at, you generally get 7% of your budget for your executive team. You get 8% of your budget for sales and marketing, and you get 15% for operations and finance. So you might find, we're spending 20% of our revenue on our operations and finance as opposed to 15%. So then when you look at that, that's finance, HR, legal, general administration, and corporate IT. You might find that you're spending way too much on your legal fees. And so now you might be like, well, why is that? Can we start bringing that down? Maybe we could bring some things in-house. Maybe we can learn how to negotiate things without having to pay our lawyers all the time. So So understanding how much you can spend in each one of these buckets just provides a lot of guidance in terms of your decision making and how that can help improve your CPR score.
Yeah, I really like that. Now you're taking away the emotional part. You're just looking at the numbers and present it right to the business owner or for the team. This is where you are. Money coming in, but then you got all this holes, right? Or all your expensive hobbies, or whatever club membership that you have that are going out money. So what would you like to do?
Yep. And that's exactly right. So I mean, and if you think about it, the numbers guy or the finance guy, I really like to think about it more as the decision-making guy. What we are trying to do is help you understand as it relates to cash, profit, and revenue, what decisions you need to make, and then what level of urgency do you need to make it. So if your score is at an 80, and that means that you're either growing fast, you're highly profitable, or you have a lot of cash, or all three. You might not have to make as many urgent decisions as if you're at a 10. And if your score is at a 10, most likely you got a cash problem, and you probably are losing money. And so, we want you to have a really strong sense of urgency. I don't believe a professional service company should be losing money. Other than real estate, there are not really any major long-term commitments that you need to make on a regular basis. Most of your costs are variable in terms of people. And so you should make a profit every single month.
So I know this is a competitive space, right? In service provided. I don't care if you're medium, small, or large. You have competitors. So you said that there are two questions that one needs to answer to differentiate your business. What are those two questions?
Yeah. So just to give you an idea, there are 1.3 million professional service companies just in the United States. And so whether you are a lawyer, an engineer, a management consultant, a marketing agency, you have dozens, hundreds, or thousands of competitors. And so I believe investing in differentiation is really important. Okay, so the first question that I always ask people to determine if they have a differentiator is literally, what is your differentiator? What makes you unique? Now, what I have found is that the answer tends to be fairly lackluster, but we're going to play off this. So it might be you get to talk to more senior people. We're
the best.
Our service is the best. We care more. We're going to work harder. We're data driven. And all of those answers I'm fine with, provided you can answer the second question. So the second question is, that is great. 49 other people who do exactly what you do just said that they have the same differentiator. How is your differentiator better than theirs? So let's just say you say we care more, or our customer service is the best.
Yeah.
Okay. And then 49 other people say, well, no, our customer service is the best. So I then want you to be able to answer this like, well, we have 24/7 support. We have a portal with a community that can answer all of your questions. The idea is that if customer service is what you want to make as your best, then what I want you to think about is, how are you going to budget towards truly making it your best thing? And so it might be that you're going to invest in response time. It might be that you're going to invest in the quality of your answers. It might be that you provide refunds, at no questions asked. There's all sorts of things you could actually do to be better at customer service. But if you don't invest in it, then it's not a real differentiator. And if you can't answer how you're better at that, then you don't really have an answer to it. So this is where your finance guy comes into play, and it says, we need a budget towards your differentiator to make it real. And if you're not, and I also want people to understand, let's just play off this customer service thing. Let's just say that Fiscal Advocate decided that we want our number one differentiator to be customer service. Well, then what I'm going to start with is a long list of all the things we can do to make it better.
Mm-hmm.
Some of the things I just mentioned. So like 24/7 support. It's like, okay, well, what do we need to do to budget to have 24/7 support? So we might have to have people in different time zones. So we're going to hire different people in different markets. And then we have to make sure that, if response time is something, well, then we need something to measure response time. And, so the idea is that it's a journey and that every year you should be better at that differentiator than you were the year before.
Should you pick one as a differentiator, or do you have multiple differentiator?
I would say it depends on the size of the company. If you look at like what I think makes Fiscal Advocate great, one, we only focus on professional service companies. I believe just with my background, we know this space better than anyone. We've spent over the last 4 years, several 7 figures on a portal or a platform that is specifically designed for insights for professional service companies. So the idea is that we believe that we can help you make better decisions. We also believe that we can save you more time through the automation. So, we're investing very heavily in our financial controls because we want to make sure that you can sleep at night knowing that all of your money is safe and in a really well-structured area. So I am investing in multiple differentiators, but generally you don't have enough money to go deep in all of them. You have to go, into a specific few.
Mm-hmm. So that will probably going back to numbers and see what matter the most, and that will probably help you make that decision. Is that correct?
Exactly. Yep. Mm. And also what you think is going to, look, at the end of the day, there's 2 things that matter. When you are in a pitch, do what you say resonate and people like what you're saying and they want to be with you? And then the second thing, and I think this is the more important thing, is do you actually deliver on that promise so that they want to be with you for many, many years? And if your differentiator doesn't help in either of those 2 areas, well, then you got the wrong differentiator, like let's just use my 24/7 support. Most of my clients are not calling me at midnight or 2 a.m. for their finances. Like it's not that. I don't think 24/7 support is like that big of a thing for this type of business. Where a doctor, that might be a really good differentiator because you do wake up in the middle of the night and knowing that you have someone to call, that could be a really cool differentiator. Mm-hmm. So you want to make sure that you pick the right differentiator for your industry that really your clients and your prospects care about.
Yeah, I think, you mentioned a really good point. Like we all say the same differentiator, right? Yeah. The same industry that you're in. It's at the second question, can you, I would even say, can you live up to it? More than one instance where I try to work with a company, right? They say all this thing, we're customer centric, we respond quickly. And then when you actually work with them, you can't talk to anyone. So that's where people switch quickly.
Yep. And that's where I also believe, typically I want you to spend about 5% of your revenue if you're in the professional service space on research and development, whether that's making your service better or actually building technology. And I also want people to understand it's a journey, so what you invest in a year from now will be better than it is today. And 2 years from now, it'll be better than it was 1 year from now. And so you're constantly making improvements along the way.
Jon, I think we get to the point that, listener will have individual questions that they want to ask you and, probably want to learn more about what their CPR score will be. If they want to reach out to you, what would be the best way to connect?
So they can always follow me on LinkedIn. I do daily posts. You can go to fiscaladvocate.com to learn about our services. I have an ebook that I wrote. It's called Decision Making Science for Agencies, but it really relates to all professional service companies. And then you're welcome to email me at jon@fiscaladvocate.com.
Jon, thank you so much for coming on to the show today. I got some numbers crunching and thinking to do.
Excellent. Really honored to be here. This was a lot of fun. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye.